Cindy, I am really excited about these new products we just partnered with.
You mean the Via Hemp products?
Mm-hmm.
Me too. I'm excited because now our listeners can get these amazing gummies at a discounted rate.
That's right.
I mean, right now, my favorite is the Via Flow State CBG and CBD gummies because we know that you guys are busy like us. For me, it's really hard to stay on track and get everything done in one day. My to-do list is like 20 pages long.
20 pages long.
The Via Flow State gummies really help me focus and they help me concentrate, and I can get through my to-do list without freaking out.
Yeah, I was looking for something to help me unwind when I started taking the Zen gummies, and they totally made me zen.
So zen, I was like, who are you?
It turns off the stress, and I was able to sleep through the night for the first time in a very long time.
You know what I really love about them is that Via Hemp products are organic. I'm all about organic.
Yes, you are.
And they're trusted by over 250,000 customers. And they have products for everyone. So if you don't want THC, they have THC free. It's up to you.
It all depends on the dosage.
Exactly. From 0 to 100 milligrams, you can choose on their website, and they have really great flavors. Strawberry, blueberry, grapefruit. I mean, there's a ton of flavors. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, when it's time to chill, I love the Delta 9 CBN Dreams because it takes the edge off, and I love how relaxed I feel.
I really like the High Love gummies. It's an organic aphrodisiac. It just makes you feel really warm and relaxed, and I tell all my friends they need to try it.
And the best part is Via legally ships to all 50 states in discreet packaging to your door with a worry-free guarantee, no medical card required.
So for people 21 and over, you can get 15% off and a free pack of these award-winning gummies with our exclusive code PITC at viahemp.com. That's VIIAHEMP.com.
That's VIIA hemp.com. Use PITC at checkout. Please support the show and tell them we sent you. Enhance your everyday with Via Hemp.
A note to listeners. The following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences.
And this case that we're going to be discussing is, like so many, it's tragic. And it doesn't, unfortunately, there's no terminus in view, if you will. And that's the tragedy of it, I think. But as for me, my background is I started with the coroner's office in the metro New Orleans area many, many moons ago. I tell my college students, when dinosaurs were on the earth, I was an investigator down there, and that's where I really started out. I was very, very young when I started out, probably younger than many of my college students working in the morgue. And after a period of time there, just shy of a decade, I guess, I went to Atlanta to the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office.
Could they still look at that soil that was burned, and would they still be able to see traces of
Remains.
carbon or remains or anything that could give us information?
Yeah, of course.
Even though it's been 11 years.
That's not that long ago. Not when it comes to burned elements like that. You can recover. I don't know how intact it'll be, but there'll be evidence of carbon deposits. And all you had to do is, you merely look at the adjacent soil. You would take a control sample from those areas, and then you go in that. And with the earth, there's something that's called turbation, and you don't really sense it in reality. And turbation is kind of what it sounds like, turbulence. It's this kind of slow moving thing that goes on underneath the earth, even untouched areas. And so the soil will move, and a lot of it's dependent upon gravity. A lot of it's dependent upon weather.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman. Hi, everyone. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, even if it's one word.
And please subscribe to our website, www.partnersintruecrime. Follow us on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram to check out our weekly promos. We're also now on YouTube at Partners in True Crime. If you subscribe to our website, you'll be getting weekly emails from us and all kinds of promotions and things that we don't advertise on the podcast. We want to thank those of you who signed up on our website this week. We're going to be adding bonus material to the tiers, so stay tuned for videos and clips. We've also launched a Patreon site and would love for you to check it out. Just a reminder that May is Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Awareness Month. a time dedicated to raising awareness of the alarming number of Indigenous women and girls, two-spirit individuals, and people who have gone missing or have been murdered in the United States.
This week, we're excited to have Joseph Scott Morgan as a guest. He is the country's leading expert in investigative forensics and the host of the podcast Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. And he is a distinguished scholar at Jacksonville University in Alabama.
This week, Rob, Paula, and I were discussing theories about what we think happened to Molly and Colt. And we keep going back to the theory of the burn pit.
If you remember, there was a fire that was burning for 10 days after Molly and Colt went missing. And there is a theory that this is the spot where Colt's body may have been disposed of.
If you watch the Up and Vanish episode Lost in Love County, you will actually see the burn pit that we are going to be discussing today.
Okay, let's hear what Joseph Scott has to say. Okay, everybody, we are very excited to have this guest on, Joseph Scott Morgan. Most people in the true crime world and the podcast world know who Joseph Scott Morgan is. His reputation speaks for itself, but for those who don't, I'd love for him to give him a little bit of background information on him. He's been nice enough to come in and kind of give his expertise on the Molly and Colt case. And so, Joseph, why don't you just start off? Tell us, who you are, what you do, what's your background. It's pretty fascinating and in the true crime world, and get us going here.
Hey, yeah, no worries. First off, thank you. I'm humbled that you would even ask me to come on. You guys are doing fantastic work. So thank you for this opportunity to chat. And this case that we're going to be discussing is, like so many, it's tragic. And it doesn't, unfortunately, there's no terminus in view, if you will. And that's the tragedy of it, I think. But as for me, my background is I started with the coroner's office in the metro New Orleans area many, many moons ago. I tell my college students, when dinosaurs were on the earth, I was an investigator down there, and that's where I really started out. I was very, very young when I started out, probably younger than many of my college students working in the morgue. And after a period of time there, just shy of a decade, I guess, I went to Atlanta to the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office, where I became senior investigator there. And in the meantime, I also worked in the morgue. I was an autopsy technician. In New Orleans, you had to do both. You had to work as an investigator and in the morgue. I worked overnights. And so I acquired a lot of my knowledge in kind of a circuitous route, being around forensic pathologists and then going out and working scenes. And so it was a great classroom for me. During my time in Atlanta, I actually helped develop the national standards for medical legal death investigators, for the country. And something I'm very proud of. Currently, I am the distinguished scholar of forensics, forensic investigations at Jacksonville State University in Alabama, not Florida, but Alabama. And I've actually, as of 2 days ago, I'm celebrating a full decade there. And I couldn't be in a better place. I love it. We're about 90 miles, as a crow flies, 90 miles due west of Atlanta, down the I-20 corridor in the beautiful Appalachian Mountains. And loving life here, and love working in media and offering my 2 cents whenever I can. I've got a podcast called Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan that's doing quite well. I'm very proud of it. And it's purely a forensics podcast. And that's what I love to do. It gives me a chance to continue to pontificate for those that aren't paying tuition. So I really enjoy doing that.
Well, that's fantastic. And like I said, we got connected with you through Cheryl Mack McCollum, who we adore, and she's a force in her own right. And she came out and helped us on this case out in Oklahoma, almost like a year and a half ago.
Yeah,
year and a half ago, right after Thanksgiving, and she came out there. Her and Maureen O'Connell, who's a retired FBI agent, who that's how we actually met Mac. And we became fast friends in this fight of these cold cases, and we just adore what she does and how she does it. And it seems she's a lot of lightness and ease in her methodology, and she just we learned a lot from her. And we were surprised that number one, that she even kind of wanted to come out and help with us, but number two, she became pretty invested in this case as well. As we've had her on the podcast a few times, but we got a chance to kind of get you up to speed a little bit on the Molly and Colt case. We have like 56 hours of podcast related to this, and talked to hundreds of people about this, and we did a documentary for Oxygen on this as well. And so we're still obviously looking for answers here. And there's always been these theories about what happened to the bodies. We don't have the bodies. We don't, we have, the people that we believe that are involved are the same names that have always come up earlier in police reports and tips that we've gotten, but there's no, we don't have any definitive proof. And, so that's why I wanted to bring someone like yourself in, who probably have done quite a few of these cases where, obviously you're dealing with a lot of the forensics in the bodies, but just wanted to get your viewpoint on this case, just from a 10,000-foot view.
Well, here's the thing. When you have one person that goes missing, right, it's a tragedy. When you got two, that adds another level to this. And that, just coming into it cold, honestly, I did, until you guys reached out to me. I had not covered this case on my podcast. I don't remember ever covering it in the media, which is a tragedy, I think. And so when I came into it, of course, my area of interest is medical legal death investigation, and absent a body, there's not a lot I can do. Now I can speculate about things, but I think that there's a couple of categories we need to look at here. And just let me kind of give you in a broad strokes, and then we can go through each one if that's okay with you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So here's some major categories that came to me when I began to think about how would you go about getting rid of two bodies? Okay. And first off, I think probably the most obvious one that everyone thinks of is burial, a clandestine burial. So that's a location where, you go, you dig a grave, and a lot can be learned from the care that is taken with graves. I'm always preaching this. Depth means time, okay? Time spent. It also implies, are you prepared tool-wise to show up and do it? And can you do it under cover? Number two is rendering down of a body by means of fire. And again, if you're in a rural, isolated area, we saw this with Grinstead all those years ago, where the body is rendered down. The trick to rendering down a body, though, and I think that, and I've worked cases like this where somebody will kill someone and then they'll simply take a gallon of gas and dump it on the body, strike a match, and walk away. And they think that that's going to render down the body. It doesn't. As a matter of fact, it actually creates more evidence for us. It's just a different type of evidence. Mm-hmm. If you really want to understand this, you look at some of the Near East burial rituals that were done in India, for instance, where you have to tend the fire in order to render down a body. And this is an age-old thing, that we've done as humans for years and years. And it's a real process. Burning a body is, in the classic sense, is a memorialization of the dead. And it requires constant fuel source, which means you have to have wood stacked up. You have to have a tremendous amount of wood. As a matter of fact, you have to have hot burning wood. Going back to Grinstead, they had access to pecan, and a lot of people don't understand this, but pecan next to hickory, it's very similar, actually. It's a very hot burning wood, so you can render down remains with that as opposed to a softer wood like a pine. So you would have to have access to that. You'd also have to have access to manpower that can tend the flame and turn it. It's not like you fire the pit and then walk away. You don't do that. You have to constantly stir it. And just a little aside, if anyone hearing me wants to appreciate a grand example of a case like this, and this is a historic case, there was a movie back in the 70s, 80s based on a book called Murder in Coweta County in Georgia. Actually, the movie starred Johnny Cash and Andy Griffith, and Andy Griffith played the bad guy in it. And it's based on a true story. Man, Andy Griffith played the best bad guys in the face of the planet. If you've ever seen him do evil. He's really evil. Well, that movie in particular talked about 2 hired men, as they were referred to, that rendered down a body over a protracted period of time. It took 3 days. Okay.
3, that's all. Just 3.
That's yeah, and that's tending the body constantly, fueling it. They stayed out by the fire, heating it and rendering it down. Then they shoveled everything out, put it into bags, and discarded it into a creek. And the one thing that caught the guy that made them do this, because these guys were African American, they were forced to do this by him. They found a single bone chip floating in a creek, and that was the corpus delicti in that case. So it takes time, and even in a traditional cremation, when a body goes through crematory, they have a big auger at the end that kind of spins around like this. They used to have these opposing marble wheels or stone wheels that would turn, and it's literally, I hate to say this, but it's reality. It crushes down the bone, anything, teeth, anything that's remaining. So if you're doing this out in the open, you have to have the ability to literally render down those remains as far as you possibly can, so that they're non-existent. They're pulpified at that point in time, and you can discard them, you can bury them, you can do whatever. The next step that comes to mind is probably wildlife. You think about how horrible the infestation in Oklahoma and Texas is with packs of wild hogs. I don't think that people that live outside of rural America, particularly the rural South, understand this. They're a very destructive force, and they are omnivores, and they do have consumed human remains. And once they do that, that's all she wrote. And I found something very interesting. If I may reference the video which I watched.
Yeah.
Sure.
You guys, first off, this thing is beautifully filmed, and I could pick up on every detail. And one of the little, it was a drone shot, and I caught something as the drone was flying over. There was a hog feeder in one of the clips. It looks like a big 50-gallon drum that's up on a stand, and that thing cast off like this periodically. It'll cast out corn or whatever feed, and they'll bring the hogs in with that. Now, hogs will eat just about anything. So if it's a deer feeder, that's fine too. But you can attract animals with that. So if you go into the middle of that, say if you have remains they don't even have to be fully intact. You can have dismembered remains and kind of cast them off among the corn, if you will, or whatever feed they're using. The hogs have the potential to consume anything that's there, because they're eating machines. That's what they do. They're like a shark on land. Okay, is what is the way I would term it. And they're everywhere. I think Oklahoma has an estimated like 1.5 million. Yeah. If you can even get your mind around that number, million population of these things. And so that's certainly a possibility. And then another consideration that I think, Rob, you had mentioned to me, and I've worked cases like this, and forgive me if you didn't, I've got a lot of static coming into my brain, is chemical rendering. And
caustic acid. They say yeah, you're hitting like all the sweet spots of the things like that. You're talking about the fire, the tending of the fire. There was a fire that was burning for days.
10 days.
Yep.
10 days. And then there's the hogs. We've been told about the hogs, that some of their remains were in. And then we were also told about them, whatever was left was put in, or even if they either one of those things weren't done, that they possibly, one of them would be put into barrels of caustic acid. And then
it would probably be, commonly it's sold under the name muriatic acid, but it's hydrochloric acid. And that's well known. It doesn't react well with tissue. Even if somebody gets touched by it, you get these large ulcerated areas. It's the combination of our physical body and our makeup and the components of the acid itself, and it does create a rendering. So if you can take a remain and expose it to that chemical process, then that would be, it could really do the job. Even if you have a partial remain that's left, with burned remains, folks might not know this, we refer to them as cremains. And so if you have cremains that are left, you could acid bath those things. those items and render them down even further, and no one would be the wiser. You would essentially do away with any kind of mortal remain that might be out there, which is, scientifically, so in our world, when we have remains that have been burned, we actually refer to them as cremains, and it's just an identifier that lets everyone know, okay, these remains have been subject to fire. And dependent upon the intensity of the fire, and not just the intensity, let me see if I can frame this correctly. There's a natural revulsion that indwells all of us, I think, relative to human remains, particularly those that are traumatized, or maybe an individual that may have had a hand in the death, all those sorts of little nuanced areas. Can you imagine being dropped in cold and you're thinking about, well, how can I get rid of a body? It takes a certain amount of intestinal fortitude to stand by and watch the remains of a fellow human being, not to mention potentially too, be rendered down through intense heat, and you're having to feed the fire. And not only do you have to feed it, you have to turn it. So you're turning coals all the time, and you're applying more wood to it. And the idea is to keep this up, you have to have ready supply. You can't just take like piles of brush, guys, and throw it on there. All right. Generally, you want chunks of wood that are easily manageable. You're going to surround the remains. You might take the remains and elevate them a little bit more if they begin to render down so much. And that's where the turning comes in. And that's it's a heavy lift. I find it fascinating. I didn't know that piece, Cindy, relative to a 10-day long event on this property out in Oklahoma. That in and of itself is fascinating. We can, is it possible? Would you have enough wood? Would you have enough wood to actually sustain a fire for 10 days? If you could do the calculation on that, and there is somebody out there that could, I don't know that I necessarily possess the brain power, but if you could do the calculation and the amount of wood that would require, assuming that you're using wood as your fuel source. And a fuel source is different than an accelerant like gasoline. Gasoline or kerosene or diesel, or whatever you're using, merely kicks the fire off. All right. The fuel source is that thing that, constantly goes. All right. Like we're standing in the wintertime, we're enjoying a warm fire. Our fuel source is wood. Right. So if you're talking about 10 days, you're talking about cords upon cords upon cords upon cords of wood in order to facilitate this. And I think that brings me to the final category, because water has been mentioned. And one thing we have to think about is, and I'm fascinated by this pond that I saw Payne go out to. This pond, and when I heard them mentioning pond, I thought this kind of stagnant, thing that's out in the middle of a cow pasture where the cows will walk up and they'll walk in the water and cool themselves down, possibly. That's not what I saw. I saw a deep hole with a waterfall. Now I know it's runoff; it's coming from upstream, but that's a fascinating element, because if that's constantly cycling, and you place a body in it. Now, did you weight it? Because you'd have to weight the body down in that space to drag it to the bottom, or if you didn't weight it, it would travel downstream, because it might not necessarily appear like it, but that's a tremendous amount of force that's coming off of that waterfall. That's a driver. It's almost like a tide, if you will, only in a creek in a rural area, and it's pushing things along.
And it's also being fed from the bottom.
Yeah.
So
so it's a spring driven event.
Yeah. So you have it. It's coming. It's directly between two lakes. Small. And you have one.
So you've got a lot of turbulence that are spinning things. It would not necessarily be the most ideal place to place a body, over a period of time. And even if you weighted the body down, let's just roll the dice and say that a body is completely intact, and you take a homemade weight. Okay, like what's the guy out in California that allegedly, that's in prison for killing his wife? Not allegedly, Peterson. I think
Peterson.
Yeah, and he had created these weights. My grandpa used to create weights for boats. I'm from Louisiana. They go fishing a lot and kind of slow moving in bayous, and so it's got a piece of rebar that's on the top like this, and it's into the form of a piece of concrete, and you drop it off the boat with a rope tied to it. Even if you had that and you tied it off around an appendage, around the neck, sooner or later, decomposition is going to take effect, and the body will begin to particulate, if you will, and pull apart, and you'll have remnants of it floating around. It's not forever and ever going to stay at the bottom. It's not like, back in the 20s, they're talking about some gangster with, concrete galoshes. It's not like that. Not to say that it couldn't happen. The fact that, and I don't know, maybe they have. Has anyone sent a dive team to the bottom of that thing just to clear it up? It's not a huge space.
Well, that's where we brought Mac out. That's where we brought him out. We actually, because the owner of the property bought the property after the disappearance and alleged murders took place. And so he had no idea what was going on. And then he found out the history about, because before, the prior owners didn't really spend a lot of time there.
Yeah.
So, and that's adjacent to the properties of some of the potential people of interest. And
Gotcha.
so they had full run of it for a very long time. In fact, the original owners were afraid to go down to their own property. They didn't live in the area because they knew these guys were, scary, and they were doing some illegal things, and they were stealing cars and creating meth labs. And so they never really came down there. So when
that's chilling.
Yeah. So when the new owner bought it, and his name Toby, and he basically kind of just refurbished the whole thing, put fencing around the whole thing, because fences were cut down, because there was 2 big ponds on there, great fishing, there was great hunting on there, and they had full reign of it. So he basically just fenced it all in, controlled the area, and then when he started hearing about what may have happened on that property, he started doing some investigative work for himself. And he's a very knowledgeable, very smart man, and he's a man of action. He's built several companies, and he moved there, and he bought all this property and built this huge hunting lodge there and everything. And he has all this great stuff on there now. But he was always troubled him because he had found a bloody shirt on his property.
Really?
Which he eventually gave to the, this is all post our documentary that we would find this out. And then, that piece of information, that piece of evidence kind of disappeared. A lot of things that Paula had found. She had found bones, and some of which she still has. We still, we'd love to have you take a look at some of these bones to see if they're actually human, that she's kept for a while. So there's been a lot of stuff that has been kind of lost, and the investigators, the local investigators, and also the OSPI, it seemed there was a lot of problems early on. They didn't really consider it, and they thought they were runaways. And the sheriff, as you know, was related to one of the guys who made the person of interest. So there was a lot of missteps, and we're not sure if they were just, bad policing, or whether or not they were engineered to keep information from getting out. But that particular pond, when Toby found out that there may have been some remains there, he actually brought in Adventures with Purpose guys. And and they partially drained the pond. They sent divers down. They brought in cadaver dogs. This is like a year before we came.
I see.
Cadaver dogs hit all over the freaking thing, at several different spots. And then but they never really got a chance to, what we really wanted to do is drain the whole thing.
Right.
Make the whole thing. So when we came, Toby allowed us to, he brought in a backhoe. He's got former Navy SEALs working for him. And he brought in these, and so we brought Mac, and we brought Maureen O'Connell out there, and we had a sifter. And so we drained the whole thing. We drained it down to the bottom. And, and it was very difficult because it did have an underground spring. So it kept on filling up a little bit. So, but once we drained it, we ran several different types of cadaver dogs, different handlers throughout the days, brought them in, federally accredited cadaver dogs, one of which, was like a old-time wartime cadaver where you find Civil War bodies. I mean, you're really reputable.
Yeah.
Cadaver dogs. And they hit, again, all over this pond, in the same areas. They all located in the same area. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time to really kind of spend the week there to do it. We thought we found some piece of information. We thought we found a piece of a human and a tongue. Yeah. it turned out to be a piece of fungi. It looked just like a friggin' piece of
Right.
I mean, it was like, whereas when the ME from Oklahoma came to pick it up, he's looking at it. He goes, I don't know. It took them a few weeks to figure out that it wasn't.
Right.
So, but that withstanding, I mean, that whole area, I think it still needs to be searched even more. The BIA is planning on doing a search. He has full access to that. They told us as soon as the cadaver dogs hit, he says, you guys got to back out. He goes,
Right.
you got to back out. We got to put together another team, and one of our team.
Can I ask you a quick question about
Sure.
where they hit? Did they flag these specific areas and then photograph it? And
yeah, we have the whole thing documented.
Okay, because that's the distribution of that is quite fascinating. And it's not a canine is not an exacting science in the sense that, because you don't know what elements their spectrum is so broad. They're amazing at what they do. Their spectrum is so broad and their sensitivities are such that can be, it's a godsend, but also it can be a deficit to a certain degree, because they might be picking up on elements that are not necessarily right there with them. They could be floating in aromatically. And but the fact that they had documented it and photographically.
Yeah, we have the entire, I can actually send you the video. We actually done.
The dogs also hit on the burn pit that was burning.
Did they really?
Yeah.
And was the burn pit sifted? I was curious about that, because I saw, the one with the PI, he was there.
Yeah.
He says you're standing right on top of it.
Yep.
I'm thinking, okay, was all of that dug out and sifted through?
It was dug out, but I don't believe it was sifted through like we did at the pond.
No, yeah, we didn't.
It wasn't. We didn't do it. We do know that they did some like excavation, or they did try to find stuff, but it wasn't as intense as the one that we did at the pond.
And then the person they brought in, that PI brought in Trace Sargent, and she's the one who her dogs hit there.
And her dogs are amazing. Her dogs can discover bones from like 130 years ago.
Right.
But that's the place that was burning for 10 days.
Yeah, and the fact that they did find something there, that the dogs did, I would love to know. What would be fascinating to me, and I'm sorry guys, I'm such a geek. I'd like to know the parameters of it.
Sure.
Did they establish a parameter where the burn pit allegedly was?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could you get an appreciation for that? And also, I think that this is key too. If there was any charring, which there should have been, you're going to have massive carbon deposits in that area. Anytime you have a fire, particularly if what we're saying is that it's a 10-day long fire. That's a lot of fuel source. That's a lot of stuff dropping down into the ground. If that's a case, you could identify the species of wood that was being used. It seems like a non type of thing, but if they're supplying this with, it would have to be a local wood. It would be interesting to know were any large wood purchases made at some point in time. Did someone back up with a pickup truck and say, I need 3 cords of wood, and they would load them in and then they would drive them? Because there are people, I live in Alabama, guys. Okay. There are a lot of folks around here that have laid in wood for 2 and 3 years. They've got it all outside their homes. You can drive by and see it. You guys can see it in rural California as well, as you know. There are people that have that, but how many people do actually have that? Because I don't know about y'all, but when I'm going down the road and I see somebody that's got a tremendous amount of wood, I'm like, holy crap, look at all that wood they've got. They really put a lot of work. This event would require a lot of fuel. And the other piece to this is, unlike a crematory or even your fireplace that you might have in a home, the heat's not contained. It's very inefficient. You ever notice how if you're at an outdoor, campfire, you get warm for a while, you sit there and you rub, but somebody has to come in and feed the fire. Well, the lion's share of that heat that's coming off that thing, you don't have access to. It's kind of going up in the air, it's disappearing. If you have a wood burning stove, or if you're near the fireplace, it contains the heat a lot better. And it's very wasteful. It's inefficient. So that's why it requires so much. I hate to keep beating this to death, but logistically, that's one of the things you have to think about.
It's interesting because no one's really mentioned that. People have talked about what could have caused it, like how long it was burning and how they were able to maintain that, but no one's really detailed like the wood. Like that's an interesting
You can't
It's
do
a
it with
practical.
gas.
It's a very
Yeah.
practical thing that people just kind of overlook. We do
You
know.
need to, hey, whoa! You guys need to talk to more rednecks. Okay, there you go. That's what. No, what I'm saying is that you can't just. I wasn't really saying it in jest, but I've got people that have just dumped gallons of gas. Even if you had 50 gallons of gas, you're still going to have something left behind because gas doesn't burn. It only flashes over and it's essentially gone. So that's a big, like I like to say, the big thread on the proverbial sweater that you want to pull, that mama's always telling you not to pull. In this case, you need to pull that. And if you can identify species of the wood itself, what's the point of origin? Because we have to assume that it's wood. It's nothing. I mean, what else is it going to be? I can't imagine charcoal. And even that would take forever. But what did they use? And those samples would need to be collected and examined, and they can examine them. There's a group of people, and I can put you onto a couple that are forensic botanists that actually do this, and they identify wood, and it's kind of their area where they dance in. I've actually taught a section of forensic botany at university, and interestingly enough, Jason Bird, who, and I don't know if I can mention this or not, but he's going to be at CrimeCon this year in just a few weeks. Jason's going to be speaking there, and he's an entomologist, and he works with forensic botanists. And so this is something that they're reliant upon in a crime lab, and that would be kind of fascinating to understand.
Yeah,
and try to get the picture of.
Yeah, the biggest problem with this case is none of that was done. There wasn't any evidence or any kind of information that was there was one local police officer who actually did a decent job just in reporting and interviewing people. But as far as a crime scene, the investigation, nothing was done. I mean, they found the car 2 weeks later, and that position of where that car, if you saw in the documentary, was probably about 500 yards from that burn pit. But we believe that car was put there later, and that wasn't the original landing spot of that car, because both Molly and Colt's cell phones were working up until the following morning, and then they get dropped out around 6 a.m. in the morning, 9 in the morning. So
what? Yeah, can I ask you about the car real quick, please?
Yeah.
One of the comments made was that, and forgive me, guys, I can't remember, I'm paraphrasing, but that the car died or the car ceased functioning. How was that validated? Was it out of gas? Was it a mechanical problem? Because I know this chase had been going on. I know that allegedly the car had passed through a few gates. I heard the state trooper actually say that. And when he said that, I picked up on something that they'd probably done some kind of matching forensically. Either there was paint transfer from that vehicle to the gate, or there was some kind of impression evidence, perhaps, because he said that very definitively in that one piece that I saw where you guys are interviewing him, or Payne's interviewing him, and he's talking about, he says very affirmatively, it's like, this car crashed through these gates. We know that it did. And I'm wondering, well, was that married up? What happened to the car? Did the car go to the state crime lab? Who had possession of it? What became of it? And what was the status of it that they were able to state definitively that the thing stopped functioning? And were the keys in it? I don't know. That's an obvious question as well.
It went to the crime lab. I do know that they had photographs of the inside. As far as it just becoming, defunct right at that spot, I didn't come across anything that said the reason why the car stopped is because it ran out of gas, or because it just, there's, to my knowledge, there was no information about why that car stopped there.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like I said, we believe that it was probably put there
later. But I do believe that it went through there.
It went through the gates.
And moved. And then they brought it back, because the day that they found it was too suspicious for me, because Paula, who's the cousin of the missing girl,
right.
She was there with her other cousin and a bunch of people searching. And then miraculously, The local law enforcement showed up shortly after and was like, "Oh, the car's over here.
You can't go down there.
You can't go down there." And she was like, "What do you mean the car's over there? Like, it just appeared there?"
Yeah.
And we just found it. How could you just find it? Like, it didn't make sense.
It's not like a stick or fallen tree. It's a
Right.
car
Well,
in a field.
You saw it. You saw the pictures of it in the field.
I
It's
did,
like,
and
there's
it
no
looked,
like big trees around it. It's like
no, it's a
field.
standalone.
It's a
You know,
standalone.
there
And
might
then-
be a little bit of brush, low-lying
Yeah.
brush around it, but it would
Exactly.
stand out like a sore thumb.
It didn't make sense. And then, you know, even Jody, the investigator that we had on, who wasn't involved in the case, but she also agreed. She was like, it just doesn't make sense that that car had been sitting there for 2 weeks. We just don't believe that.
So, like I said before, the beginning stage of the investigation were not taken seriously. They were not, you know, putting in. They were just. They were the. There was a. They contacted Sheriff Joe at the time. Contacted Khan, who he's related to. Asked him where he was. And he goes. He basically made up a story. Said they went out to Wichita Falls, Texas. That's where they are. So he just ran with that story, put it on the news. So nothing was really done until like Paula got involved from the family and realized, you know, she came down there and said she didn't know any of these people. She didn't know the environment. She's from Oklahoma, but not in that area. And just started poking around and realizing, why isn't anything being done? And so she took it like almost like an Aaron Brockovich, took it upon herself, says they're not going to do the investigation. So I have to. And that's when she hired the private investigator. And,
Gotcha.
you know, and she was working with law enforcement at the time. So anything she found, she was giving it to the law enforcement. And then some of it remained there. Some of it disappeared. There's still stuff sitting in a retired sheriff deputy's garage that we still haven't have access to. And he's getting up there in years, and we're hoping that he doesn't, you know, he misplaced some of the evidence, the t-shirt. And so it's like this, it wasn't handled properly from the get-go. And as you know, those are those crucial moments,
Yes, it is.
those first 48 hours. And if you're basically taken in a different direction, you have all this time to hide this stuff. And these guys are the people in that area were the people that we're talking about, who persons of interest. I mean, they're all outdoorsmen. They're all like, they're working on oil rigs, they're working on farms. They had access to caustic acid, because of all the oil rigs there. They had access to lots of wood, and they had access to all this property. And so it's like, we've, like I said, we've been told by tipsters, some people who are close to the people, these people that knew about it, that all those things you're talking about, that they were burned, they were, the remains were put in barrels of caustic acid, and then they were dumped in a lake or a river or something like that. So all those stories
and the hogs,
and they talked about the hogs. We've had people talking about where, their remains were fed to hogs. And so whether it was one of them or both of them, or, we don't know,
or
we have
partial.
no idea.
Well, the fact that, and I was real unclear on the timeline relative to this weapon, which looks like a 1911, if it's the one that I'm thinking about, 45 caliber 1911 ACP, and also the machete.
Yeah.
And because I'm thinking weapon puts you down, machete dismembers.
Well, we did find out, we traced that weapon back to someone else. So, that was, I don't know whether or not how that got included into the story, but, at the time it was a viable piece of evidence and testimony. But once again, this is information that's kind of being translated to us from people that are looking into this. One of which was a auxiliary or a reserve officer. So he was a retired guy who decided to become a reserve officer, kind of took it upon himself to start looking into these things. So he concluded that weapon belonged to someone else. So, but guns are readily available in that area.
Right.
Everybody has guns, and because we were told another piece of evidence that they were shot with a .22. So it's like, so we've heard that story as well. So there's so many stories.
Do you know if the area, going back to the images that I saw with the PI, Was that particular area swept with a metal detector?
I don't know.
I don't think so. And my question for you is that could they still look at that soil that was burned, and would they still be able to see traces of
remains,
carbon or remains or anything that could give us information?
Yeah, of course.
Even though it's been 11 years.
That's not that long ago. Not when it comes to burned elements like that. You can recover. I don't know how intact it'll be, but there'll be evidence of carbon deposits. And all you had to do is, you merely look at the adjacent soil. You would take a control sample from those areas, and then you go in that. And with the earth, there's something that's called turbation, and you don't really sense it in reality. And turbation is kind of what it sounds like, turbulence. It's this kind of slow moving thing that goes on underneath the earth, even untouched areas. And so the soil will move, and a lot of it's dependent upon gravity. A lot of it's dependent upon weather, the environment, animal activity over that area. And because it's carbon rich, it looked to me, because all I could go on was this man's word that he was saying you're standing right on top of it. You had vegetation that had been growing in there. It kind of looked like y'all shot this like spring. I mean, early spring, wintertime, maybe late fall. I was seeing like beige grass, I think, or something.
Yeah, I think
can't remember.
November time was it fall time, or it wasn't spring?
Nothing was greened up. It didn't look
like.
It was
at the beginning of 2019, so it was like February or March.
Yeah, so right.
It was cold.
It was cold.
I mean, we had winter coats on. Yeah,
and that makes sense. And it's good that you shot it then. I would, yes, I think that you could, if that's what he is saying, that was the site. Wouldn't it be fascinating to be able to go over that area with a metal detector, mark all of the areas where you get hits specifically? Now you could drive yourself to madness if you try to cover the entire area. You need to start off concentrically and then move out eccentrically from that location. Of course, your target is going to be the burn pile, or the alleged burn pile, and you grid it off. That's very simply what you do. You go over it with the metal detector, sweeping back very gently and patiently with somebody that knows what they're doing. You put in markers wherever you get a hit. You got a hand wand that you go back with, and you can actually narrow down the field. You got to be on your hands and knees, and it's a multi-day undertaking with somebody that has to know what they're doing, because when you get off into any kind of forensic anthropological work or archaeological work, in this sense, the devil is specifically in the details, because the things that you and I see on the dirt, or if we just turn soil, we're just going to walk by it. It's not going to make any difference to us, or we'll just say it's a clod of dirt. Not to these people. They can see things because they're trained specifically for this that the rest of us couldn't imagine. Interestingly enough, OU has got a fantastic forensic anthropology program.
Yes, we've talked to them.
Yeah,
we have spoken to them.
Yeah,
and they've got a long history. And
Paula has worked with them, because every time she finds something, she has a direct line to them.
Good. And that's what they need to do, is transport their asses out there. You need to have those people in the field, physically on top of this site, excavating it in a manner. Because here's my big question. Do the state authorities, do they have any prohibition against somebody going to that site specifically and excavating that site? And do they have to be made aware of it?
No, because when we did it, because it's private property, we were able to, Toby was able to do it. And then as soon as we thought we found something, we notified them. Mm-hmm. So we've done this before on the Jennifer Kessie case down in Florida, where we actually, again, we brought out Trace Sargent and her dogs. She had 2 different dogs hit in the same area where we got a tip where the body might be. And then as soon as we got the tip, we contacted a lawyer who contacted the FDLE, and then they brought out a team and they shut it down. They kicked us out, and then they took over for 2 days. And unfortunately, they didn't search the whole entire area, which we were a little upset about, because it wasn't that big of an area. And I was like confused on why they didn't do that, when we had a retired DEA agent who was with us, and he says they should search the whole friggin' area. Why aren't they searching the whole area? So you're dealing with a lot of politics. You're
Yeah,
dealing with
yeah,
a lot of,
yeah.
the deal with, bureaucracies and,
Oh, yeah.
the OSBI. I mean, I don't know if they're on the case anymore, but the BIA has basically taken over this case. As a result of hearing a lot of the stuff that we presented on the website, on the podcast, they were listening to it, and because Molly is part Chickasaw, they're able to at least investigate and take over that part of the case. So it's been a bureaucratic nightmare for people to look into it. Some people, we feel like they just want it to go away.
Mm-hmm.
Of course they
And
do.
because it's an embarrassment, and we're really shocked that this, even with our documentary, and then Paramount Plus did a half hour on it about a month ago, that this case really hasn't gotten national attention, because it's such, to me, it's like, it's so, I try to explain this to people, when you start looking into all the culture that surrounds this disappearance / murder double homicide, that you're dealing with a meth culture, you're dealing with and it's like a handful of people. It's not a lot of people. I mean, the same names that come up from day one are still the same names we're talking. We actually depart from it and say, hey, listen, maybe it's not these people. No, it keeps on coming back. So you have the meth culture, and then you have a corrupt local county sheriff, who was, since now he's not the sheriff anymore, and he had been a corrupt county sheriff for like 16 years. And
the headline caught the Daily Beast headline caught my eye. The strippers, drugs, and missing teens or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And and I could smell this a mile away. When I began to see him, and Payne having to chase him down, and that was kind of chilling too. The comment that he made about the family.
Yes.
Yeah.
That gets you in ass kicking mode right there.
Yeah.
Because it's horrible. It's a horrible thing to say. And the fact that whether or not he was aware of it or not, good Lord above's watching. How in the world could you make a comment about somebody like that and be that dismissive of these missing kids? I don't care what they're involved in. It's somebody's baby. And that's what it comes down to. And here, I tell you, I hate to keep returning to the burn pile, but one of the things that would really be interesting to me from a forensic anthropology standpoint is that contained within there, if there are chipped bones, a trained eye will be able to pick up on those. Okay. And bones can chip for any number of reasons. First off, one of the things we think about is they become brittle with fire. All right. Or somebody can intentionally crush bone with a sledgehammer. That has happened. That's been documented that has happened. But you know what's more resilient than bone? Our teeth.
Yeah.
Teeth are beautiful. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons that after cremation, the remains have to be crushed, is because teeth sometimes can survive a regular standard cremation. And you're not going to fragment even all the bone with a standard cremation. So if you could get somebody out there that could excavate that area, assess that area, and they could sift through that, fellas, you could be looking literally at corpus delicti, because that tooth would represent that person. And if it's protected enough, you might could do DNA extraction from it. And again, there's no guarantees with that, but if that location is accurate, and if it hasn't been disturbed too much, you might have a shot at that. And it's amazing what these people can do at that level in academia that study forensic anthropology. They can go out and assess the area very, very thoroughly. And that would be, because that, to me, just on balance, when I'm thinking about the evidence that you guys, and the kind of the narrative that comes along with the consistent thing that keeps coming up is this fire. And that's the default position with most criminals. They think that most criminals don't automatically flee to hydrochloric acid. Most criminals don't flee to dismemberment. Most of them will try to render things down with fire. And you do that at your own peril as a perpetrator, because you can potentially leave behind other evidences that you haven't thought about. If the clothing had any buttons in it, metallic, that could be there. Eyelets for shoes that can be traced back to specific manufacturers. If they tried to burn, if they didn't strip strip the bodies and dispose the clothing separately, you could be looking at that. If there are any amalgams in the teeth, any restorations at all, that could be there. Porcelain handles heat very well as well. So, you know, that's kind of where I'm just kind of spitballing right now, but that's where my mind drifts to.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We would love to have someone go out there and look at this.
But we're at a point now where the BIA they're starting to, the last time, you know, we've spoken to them, and they said they're trying to put together a plan to search all those properties in that area. The problem is they have permission from some people and, you know, not permission from others. So they're still trying to get permission to do that. And so it's not like we can kind of go in there with like an independent team right now, because they told us to just kind of back off, which is, you know, because they're working the case. So we're, once again, it's like pushing a square rock up a hill half the time. And it just keeps on, you know, you get one edge over and then.
But I have a question though, like to get a search warrant for that, if someone from like a forensic anthropologist type of situation, and they had enough reasonable doubt to, you know, that this is a possibility, why couldn't we get a search warrant for that? I mean, why hasn't that property been properly excavated if there was a burn pit there where they think one of these bodies might be? I mean, at that point,
the impetus would have to rest with the authorities, the investigating authorities, to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I love coffee just like y'all do. All right. We can sit around and drink coffee all day long. We can talk about it. But until they get their nose in the wind and catch scent of this and understand that is the area they need to go to, in my humble opinion, probably among other places. But for me, if I were the lead on this is where we would start, and we would stay there until every jot and tittle were accounted for in that location. We had thoroughly examined and then go eccentrically from there in a, I don't know, a 30-foot circumference using metal detector throughout that entire area. The fact, Rob, that you had mentioned the 22 caliber round intrigues me. If it's not going to be, and I swear that image that you guys had, it looked like a 45 caliber pistol that you said was not related.
Yeah. We're not sure if that had anything to do with it.
But either way, bullets will survive, or projectiles will survive beneath ground. And so if you could sweep that area, and you could potentially get a hit. Now, I got to tell you from my own personal experience, I say personal, it's not really personal, but I think I mentioned to you, I was involved in this Oxygen special about murdered and missing in Montana. The 3 Native American girls up there, I think they were Crow. That was, the left hand never knew what the right hand was doing, period. And you had 3 organizations. You had the local sheriff, you had BIA, and then you have the feds. Well, BIA is the feds, but it's not really the feds. When we say feds, we're talking about the FBI, and they didn't seem like they gave 2 hoots in hell about those girls. And the locals didn't either. And the BIA is like sitting here like this, you know, they've got limited resources. They have limited training, and it's their people, you know, and particularly, it'd be interesting to see what kind of assets that they could marshal, particularly since this is not on the reservation. You said Chickasaw? Is that what you said? She's Chickasaw. My ancestors are Choctaw, and they're in that area as well. One small portion of my family were removed up there. So that's certainly an interesting dynamic, and BIA, I'm not making excuses for them, but they're in a very frustrating position in order to facilitate this, because they technically are a federal organization, but their jurisdiction is kind of self-limiting relative to reservation. They step off the reservation, they're going to have to get the FBI involved in it and have them take notice of it.
Well, the FBI was involved in this case in the beginning. They were involved, U.S. Marshals. There was a lot of eyeballs on it. You had 3 different local police departments. You had Love County, you had Carter County, you had Wilson and town of Wilson, and then on top of that, you had the OSBI was brought in, then FBI was brought in, and then U.S. Marshals as things were heating up. And initially you had a lot, but they really weren't doing, this was like after, we're talking months after. We're not talking about like 48 hours after,
Right.
you know, like that. So there was a lot of splintering that went on, and you know, there was stuff that the FBI found out that they weren't telling the locals, obviously. And
Yeah.
then when Sheriff Joe was ousted in his grand jury, and Paula was, you know, she was sitting there in the lobby. The FBI agent that was assigned to it came out and was like frustrated that all he got was a slap on the wrist. And he basically said, he told Paula, says, you need to do a FOIA request on all my files because you need to see this. And so there's a lot of politics involved in this.
Can I interject one source you might want to check out? And I don't know how you would go about doing this, but this is what it comes down to, because the underlying theme for all of this is dope.
Yep.
Every bit of it, as far as I'm concerned, can't get past it.
Yep.
I think I would attack it from the perspective of the DEA. And if there's anybody that you can talk to that is the SAC in that area, particularly if, okay, here's the theme I'm thinking about. If there is a connection between whoever is cooking the dope out in that area, and there's got to be a central person that is really the pivot point for all of this, that this kid is probably involved with, that's in the car that's driving them. He took them to somewhere where they should not have been. I think if the feds, if the DEA specifically, not the feds in general, if they caught wind of the fact that they could hang a murder charge on one of these people out there that's even peripherally associated with this, because you got all kinds of issues that come up with this, because this is RICO, you've got interstate, you've got all kinds of stuff that fold into this. They might be looking to crash something down, and if you get them interested in this, they're not like dealing with the FBI. You know, the FBI is the Ivy League of everything in the feds.
Mm-hmm.
All right. They even have a term that I despise called the FBI way. And I've worked a lot of cases with them with deaths. It's always information in and nothing comes back out. That is the way it works forever and ever. Amen. DA is a little bit different. So again, that's just my suggestion for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good suggestion. I mean, I don't, you know, I think it just, there's so many things that have gone on with this case after 11 years. And there's, you know, Paula has trusted every law enforcement organization in the beginning until she found out she couldn't trust them.
I hate that.
So it's like, now we're at a point where we're just trying to keep their memory and this story alive long enough for the BIA, who we feel is probably the only one that's really looking into this, you know, with a full.
I know, but like he said, though, I mean, they do have limited resources. It might not
do.
hurt.
Hey, didn't you say, Rob, in our initial conversation, didn't you say something about that this young girl had begun experimenting with dope or dealing dope or something like that?
Yeah, she was experimenting.
Sticking her toe in the water. Yeah.
Yes, she was sticking her toe in the water. She had the guy that she was with, Colt, she was kind of enamored with, from what we know. They had only known each other for a short period of time. Like, we're talking like maybe, you know, a
couple of weeks. Yeah.
Couple
and
weeks.
Colt was dealing drugs. I mean, he had been, this is what's weird too. Colt had been arrested in January of that year for methamphetamine. It's the second time he had been arrested for distribution of meth, and his case was dismissed.
Really?
We just thought that was true. We just put all these pieces together the other day, and we were like, that's interesting. Why was his case dismissed when the other person that he was with, she went to prison for 5 years?
Is she still in the joint?
She just got out.
You reached out to her?
I'm planning to.
Good. I would.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah. Because there's something there. Like we also found out another person that was involved, and this was actually a CI.
Another dealer
that was friends with Colt.
Or whatever, working with him.
Well, they were friends. They went on vacations together.
Mm-hmm. So there's I think Mac said it the best. She said there's a lot of home cooking going on.
Oh, there is, definitely. And it's not surprising.
Yeah. And it's a very small community. It's not that, I mean, it's rural and it's spread out, but there's not that, it's not it's not a huge community. It's very, I mean, that area, you know, Long Hollow Road and all that area is, it's very close to each other. It's all connected. You look at that on a map, and it's just like boom, 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 and everything that we're hearing is happening around those areas and the people living on it. And you know, there was a oil well that the same time that we went out there to drain the pond, and we sent the cadaver dogs over another oil well, which was pretty close to the NIP property, to see if the dog hit it. The dog hit like immediately, like right on the well. And we've heard stories about them being dumped in wells as well.
One of them at least.
One of them at least, you know.
And there's a lot of abandoned ones out there that are hand dug wells that go back years and years and years. And not to mention all the pump jacks that are out there. And I've seen them, you know, they'll be abandoned. And there's all kinds of those peripheral little holes that they dig around that area. It's like a honeycomb almost. And that can, you know, that and the thing about it is the people that cook out there in these areas, they know every haunt and every holler out there. Yeah. And so they know where you could go to sequester remains, perhaps. I'm not trying to be defeatist here, but I'm just and you guys are more aware of the reality than I am.
Okay.
But just as, you know, you said that I've got this high altitude view of it, that's, you know, and again, maybe I'm revisiting things that you guys have already considered, but that's
what we do. We keep on revisiting just so, because we kind of rule them out. And it's always to get better perspective, like, you know, skilled people like yourself who've been through this time and time again. I mean, we're producers and journalists and stuff like that. We know how to ask the questions and kind of put the string theory together and you know, figure out, you know, who we need to talk to and make it welcoming for them and safe for them, an environment for them to come out and talk to us and hopefully give us information, which we've gotten a lot, but it almost kind of dilutes everything, because we're hearing it, we're still getting tips, but the tips we're getting kind of support the earlier theories. And that's why we're talking, we don't, it's going to come down to like someone admitting something, deathbed confessions, or someone who's coming to God and realizes they have to get this off their chest.
Yeah. And that's, and you never know what passes between these people in prison as they're sitting in the joint and they're doing time. And you know, how many cases have all of us, you know, seen where all it takes is somebody just out of sheer boredom runs their mouth when they shouldn't have, and that can be the key that unlocks the door. And this is not some drive-by shooting, all right, where some gangster drives by a house, pops a few caps, and then they're moving. You're talking about two young people that have not only been probably executed, but have also been rendered down in a rural area. People are going to remember. This is not something you quickly forget. And, you know, kind of hearkening back to what the state trooper said at the very close, he said, someday somebody's going to say something. I was disheartened to hear him say it could be 15 to 25 years. You know, I think that perhaps something could shake out a lot sooner than that, particularly as erratically as these people behave, and people that have associations with them. I would strongly press to do, and again, I have no idea where to apply the pressure, but to have the DEA be vested in this, because this is their territory. This is what they do. FBI gets involved in drugs, but this is where the DEA dances. And they've got CIs all over the place that people don't ever even expect. And they're going to have an interest in this. And you're right. I mean, it's like, I was I didn't giggle, but I was kind of amused the amount of money that was out there for the reward, because I was thinking in my mind, you know, compared to what a meth dealer can have, you know, if they think that anybody would snitch them out for any reason whatsoever, you know, they could offer them more money. And because we're awash in it everywhere, you know, I mean, it's the reality of it. And that's cash coming into them all the time. I don't even know if you could shake anybody loose for $100,000. And that's kind of that's the rub, right? And
well, a lot of people that have come out to us, you know, anonymously, are, you know, they're afraid for their lives because they know
I'm sure,
and they know what they can do and what they're capable of. So that's a lot of it. And so
these good people out there, they're poor as church mice.
Exactly.
Yeah. Where else are they going to go?
Exactly.
You know, it's not, and they've lived there for generations, man. They're just trying to make a living and make a family, and many of them have, and they got great families. And you get this cancer that comes into a community like this, and everybody, and what you said, God, that was striking to me. That's why I said it was chilling. The man buys the property and he's afraid to go out on his own damn property.
Yeah.
That's horrible. I mean, that if he says that, he's only one person saying that.
Yeah.
Can you imagine exponentially, you know, how many other people feel that way?
Exactly.
Because they've crossed swords with somebody, or they've had a crossword, or something has gone wrong. It's terrifying, absolutely terrifying. I'm curious about the new administration with the sheriff's department in Love County. Is it Love? Is that the name? Yeah, Love County. What's this individual like?
Well, he worked there when Joe worked there. He was a deputy. He doesn't, I mean, he gives like the standard answer, says we're still looking into it, but we know for a fact that he more than likely isn't. But it's one of those things where, you know, that you can't really go there. I mean, that bridge has been burned as far as we, you know, we've reached out to him. We've reached out to several people, but it's so stirred up down there, even to the point where the families are like getting ready to say, you know, we just want it to go away, you know, and it's hard to really kind of come to that conclusion when it's like we had, you know, Jody Barth, who's a retired state trooper, CSI from Illinois, and she's done hundreds of cases, and she's helped us with this case and look at it. And she says, because most cases when you go in there, you have so much limited information. But the crime scenes like this, you have a lot. Yeah. You have a lot of information, and it just wasn't looked into at the right time. No. And it's just, you know, because we've had lots of other experts come in, you know, NYPD, and trying to get there, like, is this the way it should be done? You know, because we're not law enforcement, but you know, our antenna comes up when certain things aren't done. It goes, that doesn't seem right. And so we have to go and clarify whether or not that was the right thing to do. And so I think just it was mishandled from the beginning. Even, you know, some of the local law enforcement who did speak up with us on the show and also on the podcast has spoken to us. They said the same thing. He said, you know, the first thing he said, the guy who worked with Joe, he says, Joe knows exactly what happened. He goes, and he had to actually eventually was forced out or left. And, you know, and that's what happens there, those things, if you're not playing along.
I'm sorry. I've got about 15 people after me right now.
No problem.
I didn't know how long we were.
That's okay. That's okay. We're wrapping up.
Calling me and a bunch of other people.
No problem.
But I believe in what you're doing, and I don't know how else I can contribute, but I can at least give you some opinions about things, and certainly I'm more than willing to chat anytime that I'm not looking for anything. I don't need a handout or anything like that. I do have a passion for unsolved cases.
Yeah.
Particularly when young folks are involved like this, that, you know, they need a fair shake in life.
Yeah.
Because I come from similar background, and so this is tragic, and, you know, they'll be forgotten. They always are. That's the way it happens. They're just kind of tossed aside. You guys are doing, you know, yeoman's work here to keep the names out there. But sometimes I know for you guys, it must feel like spitting in the ocean to do too much to raise the water level.
Yeah, it does.
So I'm more than happy to join you, and I'm more than happy also to make recommendations as to, and I know you have other people, but what other kind of resources could you bring to bear out there?
Absolutely.
That are not going to cost you an arm and a leg. That's the reason I thought OU, because they're always looking, those kids, they have tons of graduate students that are looking for experience, and that's capital for them, you know, moving forward, because they can say that, well, I went out there and they could do an entire thesis on this, or maybe dissertation work. But if you can, I don't know, engage them enough to get them out there, if it's private property, you know, no harm, no foul. Nobody else is doing anything. And the longer that clock continues to tick,
I know,
the more detrimental it could be. I heard the gentleman refer to flooding. God help you.
Yeah.
With that, and I would assume the burn pile is near the flooded area.
Water area. Yep. Yeah, so there's a lot of strikes against all of this, and it's like I said, it's been frustrating. But we really appreciate you coming on.
Thank
You
you.
did offer some really interesting information about the burn pit, which I thought was really good, and it's always good to bounce these ideas off of, because every time we talk about it, people hear it and they're like, we get calls, we get tips. So that's why we're keeping that door open.
Oh, please, I beg you, do whatever you can to try to get that pit truly excavated by a pro that can go in there and really document the hell out of it. You never know what you're going to find. I mean, you never do. I excavated the remains of a guy that I participated. I was what they refer to as a shovel leaner because I'm nosy and I'm a historian. I love history, and I had a buddy of mine that's a forensic anthropologist that was trained up at the body farm, and he worked with me in Atlanta. He said, I got a call. They found a guy made a deathbed confession that he and his buddies were searching a hillside in Ringgold, Georgia, of all places, for artifacts, because it's right adjacent to the Chickamauga battlefield, which was this ferocious battle that took place. And he said in 1966, me and my buddies had a World War II surplus metal detector, and this thing with a huge battery you had to wear on your back and, strain your arms to do this thing. And they got a hit, and it turned out that this was a Civil War soldier that was probably about 18 years old, a Confederate, that had been buried in a shallow grave by his buddies. They were trying to make it to a field hospital that was just over the ridge, an old Presbyterian church. They didn't make it. He had a perfect 54 caliber bullet hole in the back of his skull. And the reason he wanted to get this off his chest before he died is that he felt like he had disrespected the dead because there was still part of a uniform left, and they just picked it up and shook it like that, and all of the bones and everything just fell back into the hole, and they covered it up. But they recovered cartridge box, buttons. We found a whalebone underwear button while we were out there. But they had found a mess kit, a spoon. They didn't find a weapon. They'd hauled that off probably. But you never know what you're going to find. When you go out there, you can't, I'm saying the universal you, not you, but, just you cannot leave no stone unturned. And that's why that's the concentric area right there. I can't stress that enough. I think that's an important starting place.
We agree.
We totally agree. Thank you so much.
If you have any information regarding the case, please contact the BIA at www.bia.gov/BIA/missing-murder-unit.
You can also call their hotline with tips at 1-833-560-2065 and email them directly at ojs_mmu@bia.gov.
And if you want to text them with a tip, text keyword BIA-MMU and send your tip to 847-411.
Check the Partners in True Crime website for this and any additional information.
If you or anyone you know is suffering from a methamphetamine addiction, please contact the American Meth Addiction Hotline.
If you or anyone you know has been the victim of sexual abuse, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline. All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content. Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and listen to Vi's original song, Take Me Back, written for Molly Miller.